Welcome to Something Positive for Positive People. I'm Courtney Brain. Today's episode is going to tap into discordant dating. Discordant dating is where one partner is, in this context, positive for herpes, and the other is not positive for herpes, or at least they are unaware of what their status is. This is something that I've covered once on a podcast episode, and I interviewed a couple, and it's really long and old, and I really just want to revisit that topic um, from a few different angles. I'm working with the Pornhub Sexual Wellness Center on blog articles. I get a little insecure sometimes about the fact that it seems like all I talk about is herpes when there's so much more complexity to the work that I do. But I'm attempting to get into expanding in these different spaces and territories. The Pornhub Sexual Wellness Center is somewhere that I've blogged before, at least a handful of times, but I'm wanting to continue to put the message out there in places that um, need to hear it. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna talk about discordant dating, and before starting that, I want to make a few brief announcements. One is that, of course, the Something Positive for Positive People conference is happening May 23rd, 2024. That is on a Thursday. It's virtual. We're starting at 10 a.m. and then we will end at 4 p.m. and this is Central Standard Time. Okay. So that's going to be 8 a.m. start time Pacific and a 2 p.m. end time. And then Eastern time, that's 11 to 5 p.m. and that's Eastern time. Okay. This conference, we're going to analyze the herpes stigma survey data that we've been collecting. We've gotten more than 1,200 responses so far. And our principal investigator, her name's Megan, she's going to analyze the data, put it together in a presentation, and then present it as the keynote speaker of this conference. All right. And with that, what we're going to do is we're going to create some tools and resources for people who are living with herpes to be able to use it for disclosures and navigating discussions about your sexual health status with partners. So that alone will be, worth the cost of admission to come to the conference. Tickets are on sale right now for $55. After February, these ticket prices are going to go up to $75, and that's going to be the general admission price. That's what everybody's going to have to pay who didn't buy a ticket when it was on early bird sale. This is a really good price for such a conference. It's something that hopefully over the years will be in person, and the more engagement that I get from people, the more involvement from people who are herpes positive, the more that we can do. So that might look like having an in-person conference. That might look like, there's a lot that it can be, and I don't want to speak too much about what's possible versus what is. So we have that right now. I am evolving the herpes support groups to be centered around um, restorative yoga practice. So, restorative yoga for people with herpes. That's what we're looking at. Yeah, all right. So that's gonna be what the support groups are now. If you need one-on-one support, I at this point in time, this will change over time, but I just ask that people send proof of a donation, and then we arrange a time for us to speak on the phone. That's how the support calls work. I'm not going to continue to give, the guidance that I give and the caliber and quality of guidance that I'm giving on social media. Like, if you want to talk, send proof of a donation, and then we can get on the phone. And that's how that works for support calls. Okay. on March 1st, I am going to begin leading a restorative yoga practice that is themed and inspired by Letting Go by David R. Hawkins. Okay. So when you hear that, I want you to think a book club for yoga, right? But you aren't responsible for reading. It's going to be me. I've read this book several times, and I've created an outline of what I'll want to talk about. So we're not going to stretch and do what, young white women in Lululemon have done to yoga. What we're going to be doing is there might be a little bit of movement. Okay, so we might do some poses. Things are going to be on the floor. It's just going to depend on what these forms say as I look through and see who's filling them out. Like, I am learning about what people's accessibility needs are, and as I learn what their accessibility needs are, I'm able to structure the movement around those things. But I will be utilizing the letting go technique in the support groups for sure. And between March 1st and May 19th, we will host 20 yoga sessions. All right. So I'm encouraging people now to get onto Something Positive for Positive People membership so that you can access the materials and you can attend the classes, because this is only going to be for members. I'm not letting people drop in. I'm not letting people make a donation and join. This is exclusively for members. You must be a member, okay? And after February 10th, if you want to participate in these monthly or in these yoga classes, you're going to have to subscribe monthly at the top tier, which is going to be $50 a month. That's available at this point in time. All right. So even if you join for $5, $10 a month right now, you will have access to 20 of these classes. This is a whole series, y'all. And this series is going to be on letting go. And the letting go technique is something that has served me tremendously, not just with my herpes diagnosis and releasing my feelings about stigma, but also in my personal life, the way that I communicate with people. This has been something integrated into the way that I host the podcast, the way that I work and run the nonprofit, how I communicate with people about dating and disclosure, as well as how I communicate with the healthcare providers and what it means to be stigma free. Okay. So yeah, please visit www.spfpp.org/yoga, and that is how you register and you can become a member. All of the instructions are right there. I put a video which summarizes the content on the website as well. So please take a look, listen, and read, and you'll know how to sign up. And then don't forget about the conference. That is spfpp.org/conferences with an S. Okay. And that'll take you to the registration page. You can read more about the conference. I put a lot of detail there. And yeah, you'll be able to purchase tickets. Okay. Now let's get into the content for today. And we're talking about discordant dating. I myself have had partners who do have herpes, don't have herpes, and don't know whether or not that they have herpes, okay? And what I've come to learn throughout my experience dating and navigating the stigma of dating with herpes is if somebody likes you, they like you. And there's really nothing that you can do to make them not like you except for, be disrespectful or, not receive what they're doing, not receive their attempts to connect with you, right? So, starting from the first relationship that I got into after my herpes diagnosis was with someone who knew someone who had herpes. So I want to take a little bit of time here and touch on that because I don't know that she would have received my disclosure to her as well as she did had she not known someone close to her who had tested positive for herpes, right? Because she was able to not only have a point of reference of someone who she valued, loved, respected, and see them as somebody with herpes, which overwrites the belief that a person with herpes might be, when we look at the myths of herpes, right? They're dirty or they're not safe with their sexual partners. So a person who knows nobody living with herpes only has that to go off of. Whereas someone who does know someone who's living with herpes, they have a new starting point, and this starting point is going to be what their reference point is of the reference point for a face with it, right? Because herpes itself doesn't have a face, it just has a stigma. Whereas our family members, our friends, our lovers, there's a face, there's a personality, there's character traits. There are all of these other things that come with people that we know. When we humanize the virus, it's putting a face to it sort of puts a story to the condition. And of course, that's what something positive for positive people has done over the years, which is give, not just people who have herpes hope for dating and hearing from the experiences of other people navigating stigma, but it also gives a face and a personality and character and all of these intangible aspects of being human. And then it's like, oh, by the way, herpes is something that this human has, right? And that first relationship, I believe, really shaped my views on dating and disclosure, especially to someone who doesn't have herpes all these years later. I've been thinking about that relationship as I wanted to cover this topic because there are components to it that I believe are relatable by different people. So the first piece that I've spoken on is that she knew someone who had herpes. And so we were able to continue the relationship after she spoke to this person and got some understanding. And I imagine that when this person that she talked to about herpes, found out that I had herpes, that this person, spoke very positively of, me. And now this was years ago. This was shortly after I was first diagnosed. But this other person, like, I imagine had my back, y'all. Like, so knowing someone who has herpes, right? If a person who doesn't have it that we disclose to knows someone who has it, it makes it a lot easier for us because we don't have to do that work. Someone that they know, love, and trust is capable of doing that work. So when we know someone who is living with herpes, or us as people who have herpes, knowing that someone knows us, there's a seed planted for success for others who might have herpes and might end up in a dating or on a date or, about to be sexual with the person that knows about our status, right? So if a friend of ours who doesn't know anything about herpes learns something about herpes from us, then they go on and date and someone tells them they have herpes, we kind of wingman that shit for them. And there's something to be said about that because it does take so much of the burden off of the person, the people who are having to initiate the conversation. Think about how good it feels when you've disclosed your herpes status to somebody and they respond with, oh yeah, I know someone who has that, or oh, that's not that bad. My friend told me this about it, right? That is so much better of a response than all right, I need to read up on it. And, it's not something that people should read up on. And this is something that we're working on. It's something positive for positive people, which is integrating the understanding, key terminology, language that is stigma free from what we've learned from people with herpes into sex education and STD prevention, right? So we are in the process of actively going out and training sexual health care providers on providing stigma free care. We are working on that, y'all. Um, and it's another way of people being connected to the herpes resources and having an understanding of stigma to where the burden isn't on us. So when I talk to and train sexual healthcare providers on providing stigma-free communication, that communication translates to their patients. That communication that transfers to their patients also translates to the dating climate we're in and society. So as we talk about things in a stigma-free way, I even have a presentation that's coming up later today. That's why I can't sleep. It's 3 a.m. It's 3:30, almost 4 a.m. I have a presentation at 4 p.m. on stigma minimization, talking to sex educators who teach youth. So this is going to be new for me. I'm going to be talking about this to youth because now we're going to be instilling this information in it's middle schoolers, sixth graders. Talking to them about this. So I have to adjust my language significantly. And I want to give a shout out to somebody for helping me with this presentation. She's been in the school system and taught like youth. And I want to do this right. I want to do this right. I want to work to be in every space that I can to minimize the impacts of stigma, which I've seen over the years really hit hard for people. Okay. But one of the ways is for us as people who are living with herpes to be able to disclose our status to someone we know so that they can have uh, that reference point of what someone who has herpes, looks like and how they behave, right? Uh, Staying on this relationship, yes, it's a discordant relationship. Yes, we started out, we were together. There were some things that along the relationship happened. I always reference this relationship where my partner was okay with it until she wasn't okay with it. So I remember there was a day we were having sex, and I know she had just gotten tested for STIs, and I was on top of her, missionary, and I remember that she like started to cry, and I was like, "You good?" She was like, "I can't do this," and I withdrew, and I went to the bathroom, and I put it together in my head that, oh, she just got tested, the results came back negative, and she has a second chance, right? A second chance of not having herpes rather than engaging in a relationship with someone who does have herpes and putting herself at risk every time that we have sex for getting herpes. Okay, perfectly valid, nothing wrong with that. That's what she chose to do. Um, this relationship and the way that that happened could have jaded me and made me withdraw and only date people who have herpes to avoid that. Now, you can only date people who have herpes. There's nothing wrong with that. I invite you to look at your intention behind it. Are you doing it because you are avoiding the realities of the potential rejection, or are you doing so because that's what you genuinely want to do? I hear from a lot of people who they will not date outside their status. they'll only date people who have herpes. And there's like this sense of high moral standard or something where they're like, oh, I'm so much better than you because I only date within my status, right? So it's just like the snobbiness is very prevalent in the herpes community, right? And what I mean by that is you can be a herpes type snob, like, oh, you have type 2, I have type 1, so this won't work. And what we're doing is we're disqualifying potentially really good partners for us in ways that matter more so than ways that don't matter, y'all. Herpes is herpes. It ain't been a person that I came across who didn't have herpes, who when I told them I had HSV2 versus HSV1 cared more about what type it was than what it is. Whereas people who have herpes are more discriminatory towards the type of herpes that you have than people who don't have it, who want to date you moving forward. So I have type 1 and I have type 2. When I only had type 2, I remember there was someone who I went on a date with and we met on that dating site. And on that dating site, her profile said type 2, nothing else. And I remember we were in my car and I was driving and we just were having a conversation and she made a mention of type 1. And so while she was talking, and this is bad, I pulled my phone out. She's talking, I'm driving, and I look, and I went to her profile, and I saw that type 1 was magically on there now all of a sudden. And when we talked again, I made a comment. I was like, hey, I feel a little bit deceived and lied to that, you told me that you only had type 2. That's what was on your profile. And now you're talking to me about type 1. Like, I don't want to do this. And, in hindsight, I feel bad. And I was able to later apologize to her. This was years later. Like, I started the podcast and I've honestly become a completely different person than I was before I started something positive for positive people. All for the best, for sure. But I don't like that I was that person who discriminated for the type, but I didn't know anything. And a lot of people just don't know anything. Not only that, but they don't know any people to have any sort of point of reference for herpes and what that means. So, I don't tell people what to do. I just kind of tell them, what to think about. And one of the things I want people to think about is being able to challenge yourself. Let yourself disclose your status to someone close to you and be that point of reference for someone else. My greatest healing has come through the offerings of something positive for positive people and being here and being there for other people, right? And so this is one way that you can show up for other people, by just being the point of reference that somebody has for when, someone tells them that they have herpes, so that that person can be supported. Because I know that y'all don't know this, but podcast guests and people who share your experiences with me, you give me a point of reference that is relatable to people for when I do these one-on-one calls, or when I facilitate these support groups, or when I'm hosting the yoga class, right? You give me a point of reference to relate to people, and y'all have much more of an impact on people than you would ever imagine knowing that you have, right? This is me talking. I'm in a very unique place to where people are able to access me, and I'm able to access, the information bank stored within my brain and on the podcast feed of experiences shared with me by so many other people. Now, again, just going back to people who don't have herpes, really don't care what type of herpes you have. If they like you, they like you. And we can get so caught up in our head about, oh my God, this person doesn't have herpes and I do. I'm going to be extra careful. I'm going to wear condoms. I'm going to jump on antivirals. And we will preemptively make decisions for ourselves for them that can actually impact the relationship negatively long term. And one of the ways that looks is perfect example. So story time. Before I started something positive for positive people, I started the podcasting in 2017. Okay. It was it was early 2017 or late 2016 when I was dating. I was on the dating app, and I saw that there were people talking about, how their diagnosis made them want to end their lives. But there was a young woman who I had become friends with. This was a black lady, and I remember that she shared with me that she was in a relationship and she really just wanted to make friends with men to have like an idea of what to expect for when her boyfriend ended up testing positive for herpes, because she disclosed to him, she got the best response you can get. Well, baby, if you got it, we got it, right? I ain't going nowhere, all right? She seemed to be in her career successful, and she and I had become friends. And the herpes thing would come up often, and I just would share with her my feedback and my experience on the symptoms part of it. And then there was a day where she said to me, she said, "Can I tell you something?" I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Well, I think about killing myself, or I thought about killing myself because of my herpes diagnosis." And I was so shocked. I was shocked. My initial shock was, black people don't do that shit. And then, over time, I became exposed to people who weren't part of my culture. And I learned that actually, that's not a black people thing. It's a people thing. Or I'm sorry, it's not a black people thing to not, kill yourself, right? And then I started to, as I grew up and evolved in this space, see that the mental health impacts affect different communities differently, which is a different conversation. But I was shocked. And, this is the story that led to me looking at this, or being more on the lookout for it. And then starting to interview people about their experiences navigating herpes stigma. So this woman was in this discordant relationship, and yet still she was so proactive for her significant other, who could care less about what her status was and what the symptoms were. And I imagine that it affected their relationship. I imagine that, on one hand, you have this, I need to be on my best behavior. I need to do no wrong because this person is making the sacrifice of being with me, even though I have an STD. That's where a lot of people's heads are at when they get into discordant relationships or dating situations. And we might hover around, like, constantly checking their genitals when we are sexually active to make sure that they don't have anything visible showing. Anytime that other person gets sick, we're hyper vigilant to be on top of it. Oh my God, is it herpes? Do you think it's herpes? Here, you can take some of my antivirals whenever people get sick. And I see it, y'all. I see it. I have seen it. I've been guilty of it. But that's because there was a lack of self-trust, self-respect, and there was this element of self-rejection that was so prevalent in me because of not feeling worthy of a relationship, that this thing that I made such a big deal out of, my herpes status, was so insignificant compared to the more important things. Like that just wasn't it. And I've also, been in relationships, in that relationship, that one ended, but I went into other relationships where my partner didn't have herpes, and because they were accepting of my diagnosis, I tolerated so many things that I just shouldn't have. And I was with people that I shouldn't have been with. And, people were with me and they shouldn't have been with me. But I never once let that fear of, giving somebody herpes, and because what happens is you take away their choice, right? Their choice in the matter. If they say they're okay with it, then we have to believe they're okay with it. I've never taken away somebody's choice of being with me, once it's happened, but like preemptively, I would disqualify myself from potential partners because of my beliefs and feelings around my diagnosis. So if you're someone who, you're dating and, maybe you're a little bit resistant to dating people who don't have herpes, or putting yourself out there to people who don't have herpes, or you notice that you've got crippling emotions about yourself and stigma because of your diagnosis, please, I invite you to check out the SPFPP/yoga tab on the website so that you can see how yoga can benefit releasing those negative emotions that are interconnected with herpes stigma. All right. I believe that this is a powerful tool for supporting people through navigating herpes stigma. And as far as I know, I'm the only person who is at least open about it. I might even just start branding myself as the herpes yogi, or yogi with herpes, right? We'll see. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, like it all really starts within. It starts from within. Our unwillingness to date or pursue relationships with people who don't have herpes, I believe, is centered around our sense of self-worth. We don't believe ourselves to be worthy of the kind of relationship that prioritizes these compatibility pieces that have nothing to do with herpes. And that's on us because of our feelings, like our fear of rejection, our fear of passing this virus on to somebody else and being responsible for giving them the stigma and becoming the person that we might, have really negative emotions towards. We may have really bad emotions towards, the person who gave us herpes, or that might even be misdirected because we think we know who gave us herpes and it ended up not being, it may not be that person. So we might be wasting unnecessary emotion power on something that's irrelevant, on somebody who, they didn't actually give us herpes, but we assume they did because we can't really know. Now, if you know, of course, but we can't allow for that situation, those people, to have us harboring negative emotions about ourselves and people that we don't know and won't allow ourselves to get to know because we're projecting our beliefs about stigma and ourselves onto these other people that we might date or end up in a relationship with. So, just in concluding that, like, to be in a discordant relationship, the priority doesn't need to be on the herpes. It really needs to be on your compatibility because that's what the other person's looking at. If they choose to be in a relationship with you, they know the risk that they're taking, and we have to trust that they know the risk that they're taking. Be able to answer whatever questions that they might have, trust that they are doing their own research and that they're with you because of you. And if you have trouble accepting and receiving that, I deeply invite you to join the Something Positive for Positive People membership. Join at the tier at which, I'm asking people to join at the $25 a month tier for the yoga classes. But at this point, until February 10th, 2024, you can join at any tier and you will have access to the yoga classes in the cohort. Now, this is going to be something that, again, is 20 sessions. I'm not piecemealing this to anybody. Everyone who is registered is going to get the 20 classes. And if you can't make the live classes, you'll have access to the recordings. I'm making that happen. All right. So spfpp.org/yoga to sign up for that, and then become a member, and you'll have access once the email goes out with the links to everything. Okay. Um, I I'm open to questions. Like I've revamped the website to where people can comment on. Well, that's always been the thing. People just haven't commented, but the website is up. I'm doing more through there than I am on social media. Just the value isn't there for me anymore because of the limitations that are being placed on sex educators and people who work in the field of sex and STIs and even, I think even STD prevention, because I'll talk about that kind of stuff. And, these are generally topics that don't perform well on social media. So I've been putting a lot of time into the website. You'll notice when you go to it, and you'll see just how much more visible it is and how clean it is and how concise the content is. So, all right, y'all. If you have questions about Discord and dating, please send them in, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. All right. I want to shout out to the American Sexual Health Association, y'all. They've been active, at least in the herpes community, since the 1970s. They are a sponsor of the Something Positive for Positive People conference. If you visit spfpp.org/conferences, you will be able to learn more about them as well. I invite you to please attend the virtual conference that is the SPFPP, first ever virtual conference. The theme is sexual health is mental health. And yeah, we're gonna be doing this, y'all. We doing this. All right, y'all. Till next time.